We've seen that kind of more recently as we've launched a new robotic system, and we think this is kind of the right strategy for long-term growth. And then from a strategic innovation perspective, which is really the
Hi there. Let's get started. We have Jim from 22nd Century Group, a leading plant biotechnology company focused on technologies that alter the level of nicotine and tobacco plants and the level of cannabinoids in hemp cannabis plants through genetic engineering, gene editing, and modern plant breeding. Take it away, Jim.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thanks for everyone for participating and for the opportunity to talk with you folks this morning. Time is really short, so we're going to jump right into the opening slide on slide 3, if you would, May. And just to let you know, we've put together a few slides with some information you can read through. I'm going to give you additional information here as well to reinforce some points. And combined, I think we can get through through this efficiently and with additional information in your hands at the end of the day. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, 22nd Century is a plant-based biotechnology company with a current focus on 2 franchises and 2 massive end-use markets, tobacco and hemp cannabis. Our primary focus, mission, obsession, purpose, as we see it, is reducing the harm caused by smoking. Remember, in the US, there are still 1,300 deaths per day from harm caused by smoking. And we feel very strongly we have a real solution to offer. So our short-term objective is to secure the FDA Modified Risk Tobacco Product Authorization, or MRTP. And we are fully prepared to launch our VLN cigarette brand within 90 days after that authorization. We've referred to this in the past as really our home run scenario. We continue to believe that with high confidence that we are in the final stages of an MRTP authorizations based on conversations with FDA and other data points. And likewise, the launch of the VLN 90 days after that. In fact, confidence is so high, announced in the past, that myself, along with our CFO and COO, have deferred our variable pay until such time. So we continue to drive that forward very strongly. But in addition to this, and based on recent events that I'll go into here in a moment, we have a re-energized excitement to continue to support around the nicotine mandate to make all cigarettes non-addictive. This is really a grand slam scenario. And I will talk more about that shortly in more detail. But we're not a one-trick pony. 22nd Century can bring disruptive plant-based biotechnology across 2 franchises of tobacco and hemp cannabis in many ways. We have other targets in tobacco beyond low nicotine to serve high-value end-use markets such as pharmaceutical and medical OTC. We focus on upstream value chain and hemp cannabis and have a library of disruptive plant line technologies and IP that can be monetized in 2021. And with new targets that open up the premium cannabis market in consumer products, pharma, and medical OTC as early as 2022 and 2023 that we're very excited about. And I'll talk more about that here shortly in a few more slides. I've said this before, but I want to reiterate it. We have a very strong balance sheet and no need to raise capital to execute our strategy as we move forward. And even considering recent gains on our shares, and it's been quite active, I believe our stock is still very undervalued. Even without having the MRTP, I believe the range could be 2 to 3 times higher than the current level. So May, if we can go to slide 4, please. The first thing I want to do is point out some hard facts around our tobacco franchise. As you'll see on this slide, there are 1 billion smokers in the world. 2/3 of them want to quit. Less than 10% succeed in quitting, and half of smokers made an attempt to quit. Our consumer studies show that 60% of adult smokers indicated a likelihood to use VLN, and this is with a population of over 3,000 people versus a premium brand. Again, we believe this is a home run scenario, and it's not a matter of if, but when, and it's measured in months. We've said this before, and we continue to have high confidence in that. We're fully prepared for the VLN launch within 90 days of the authorization and the ability to then introduce consumers to the world's lowest nicotine content combustible cigarette, the first and likely only one that will hit the market. So if we go over to slide 5, May, please. And here I really want to talk some math based on recent developments. Again, you could read through the slide here with the data points that we've put together and put in front of you in the past. But with our share price moving and some comments we've made before, I really wanted to walk through some math to tie out our valuations as we move forward and our belief in the valuations as we move forward. So if you've listened before, what you may have heard in the past, and it's still consistent, that we've been using a premium pricing strategy in the VLN brand considerations. And really, in our opinion, have been using a conservative gain of 0.25% of the market share in the introduction of the product and in the early stages of the product. This would mean that 1 in 400 smokers would use VLN. And that's where we're coming up with our original valuations of 10 times that price at the time, which at that time was below $1 per share. But remember, 60% of adult smokers indicated a likelihood to use VLN in those consumer studies. And we've got what I consider a very intelligent shareholder base that I've committed to listen to. Now, they're great communicators on message boards, and quite frankly, they're very compelling at mathematics. And the 1 in 400 usage level, would equate to a share price and a market cap now roughly 4 times the level that it is today, or around $10 a share of estimate, if you could look at the mathematics on those boards. 1 in 100 would be 15 times current level. 5 in 100, 80 times. 10 in 100, 160 times. And 15 in 100, over 200 times. Now, this might sound absurd, but you'll need to decide, is it any more absurd than a battery operated car taking on big auto with what is truly disruptive technology? We think there's something here. We think we're going to drive it forward, and we're in that certainly that home run scenario in a very big way. Now, bear in mind, this is still without a mandate. So in addition to all of this, potentially, the recent political movement suggests that nicotine mandate may end up prioritized on the universal agenda again. This we've talked about before, and this really is a grand slam scenario. Why do we think the stars and the planets might be aligning on this? Well, there's a few reasons. There's now a Democratic White House about to take place, a new administration coming in January. There's a potential for a Democratic House and Senate. And President-elect Biden's HHS nominee, Javier Becerra, was one of 5 state attorney generals who backed the FDA nicotine mandate. So we're growing confidence of the mandate coming back on the unified agenda as the new administration comes into power in 2021. All of this, bear in mind, is just around tobacco and VLN. But as I said before, we're certainly not a one-trick pony. Hey, if you could turn to slide 6. So talking a little bit about cannabis, our strategic focus is squarely on the upstream part of the value chain. That's around plant biotechnology, seed, breeding, cultivation, and extraction. That's where our specialty is, that's where our strength is, versus the downstream formulated products area. We want to serve those markets as broadly as possible. Now we've got a very strong partnership and an expanding partnership with KeyGene on the plant genetics, and a refocused partnership with Panacea, again, to the upstream value chain that I had mentioned. Bottom line in cannabis and hemp is that we have today disruptive first mover technology and IP to both open up the premium hemp cannabis market into CPG, consumer products, pharma, medical, OTC, as early as 2022 and 2023, and an ability to monetize the technology that's been gleaned off of the KeyGene work in the past 18 months in 2021 with strategic partners. We continue to drive that down through our strategy as we speak. Now again, this is across our 2 current franchises. Maybe if you can go to slide 7. So this really summarizes our priorities that I've already talked about. It does mention the 3rd franchise that I've talked about in the past, and we will introduce. Time was very limited today, so I won't drill down into that. But as I said before, we have a 3rd franchise identified. We're securing IP and strategic partners, and we'll identify that in the months to come. We are going to make sure that we have absolute critical mass on both tobacco and cannabis before turning our attention towards this 3rd franchise. But that is coming. And I want to make sure I've got plenty of time for Q&A. But I do want to close with really one request. And that's a call to action with the regulatory bodies. We don't need any additional help on securing the MRTP. As I said before, our confidence level is very high on that. But I will call to action for help on the mandate. We're doing our part through a variety of channels on a legislative basis to refocus and drive this mandate now that the new administration is coming on board. But we can use your help, and I will call you to action. Write the FDA, write your state and federal House and Senate body, and demand that the nicotine mandate get prioritized again on a universal agenda to save lives. Again, 1,300 deaths per day. This has to be driven forward. The new administration has the ability, and I think the likelihood of bringing it back onto their prioritization. But this is where we need the grassroots movement to drive it and help drive it. And it's very possible, again, with the new administration. So hopefully this gives you a broad overview and a little bit more information to go off of than in the past. And with that, I will thank you and turn it over to a Q&A session accordingly.
Okay. Hi, James. This is Arham. I wanted to talk to you about your cash position and where you think that leads you into the future, how much you're burning each quarter, and how sustainable you think current levels are.
Yeah, great question. I thank you, Armin. We've done, on top of everything I've just talked about, we've done a lot to reduce our cash burn by getting more efficient without mortgaging the future. So based in our current position and based on the run rate we expect going into 2021 and 2022, we've got close to 2 years worth of cash, including the cash required to launch VLN into the marketplace. And certainly then to partner with strategic partners as that takes off. So hopefully that answers your question, but that's where we're at. And that's why I keep on saying we have no need to raise additional capital to drive our execution moving forward. And again, we've approached this from two ways, both on the cost initiatives that we've put in place, getting creative with the strategic partnerships, and then also factoring in what we need to accomplish on both the tobacco and cannabis franchises moving forward.
Hi, Joe Romelli here. I was wondering, when you look at your higher dose nicotine cigarettes that I guess didn't get approved by the FDA yet, in some ways it would seem that counterintuitive that maybe those would actually reduce the amount of cigarettes and reduce the harm. So how should we think about that compared to the low dose in terms of how that impacts the number of cigarettes people are smoking?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the team really has gone back and reviewed this. I think the concept in the time, and it may have been just an idea ahead of its time, and perhaps the approach wasn't quite perfect for the time. But we do think there's an opportunity there from a pharmaceutical perspective, let's say, with the higher nicotine levels. So we haven't conceded that. As I said, the focus is on getting VLN into the marketplace to drive that. But I'd say the higher nicotine approach, both from isolating nicotine for other uses, pharmaceutical, medical, OTC, and possibly even in the smoking side, is not off of our radar screen. But we're going back and addressing that and seeing what how best to approach it, given the new set of realities that we've got moving forward. I would say that regardless of how we approach it, it's certainly a longer lead time program than anything on VLN, which is we believe right on our threshold.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, James, what, can you kind of go over the level of confidence you have on the FDA approval? Why do you have such high degree of confidence outside of what I heard, which was the Biden administration? Why do you have such a high degree of conviction on that? And what backup plan would 22nd Century have if that doesn't go through?
Yeah, thank you again for a great question. So I'll come at this from both the MRTP perspective and the mandate perspective, because I think both are important. So on the MRTP, and we're in constant dialogue with FDA. They've been very responsive. It's a very good sign that the communication flow is solid. Of course, our comment period ended in May. We have continued to ask them if they need anything more from us from a scientific and regulatory basis to support their decision, and they continue to indicate no. So the combination, of course, working with the FDA, there's still a bureaucratic organization with their rigid processes and everything. So it's challenging to get crystal clear answers. But the connectivity we've got with them, the back and forth we've got with them, the timing around our comment close period in May, and the time period between Q4 and early into 2021 still lines out very well. So from an MRTP basis, and they've posted recently additional information on their website. So we continue to have high confidence it's very much going in the right direction, and we do feel that they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's in the final stages of the process. So that's the triangulation we're utilizing to continuing to improve confidence, and we make sure that not only are we connected first party, but through other parties as well to make sure we're getting objective information from a variety of sources. Moving forward, this is the third business I've been involved with that required an FDA approval of some sort, and I will say that 22nd Century has been using a very solid approach to moving this forward in concert with the FDA, who between them and the NIH, spent well over $100 million in these clinical studies, and certainly are proponents of the approach of VLN. So that's why our confidence continues on the MRTP. So much so that we really are now turning more of our attention towards the nicotine mandate again. Under the current administration, it seemed to take a back seat. But the plans are aligning based on President-elect Biden's approach on cancer in general, healthcare in general, along with his nominee on the HHS side, and the potential for Democratic Party administration pretty much across the board. So we do believe, and the next opportunity to get it on the universal agenda is coming up in the spring, and we do believe that things are in motion to get that back in place as early as potentially the spring or sometime in 2021. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so I just want to follow up with another one. In a business like this, my assumption would be that you should expect lawsuits, litigation, left and right. What has been your history or current history of that, and what can you tell the shareholders, thinking that you're going to be dealt with these things on an ongoing basis?
Are you referring to lawsuits from other competitors, or could you help just refine?
Sure. Yeah, all over the place, but I'm looking, and I just glanced over your conference call and your financial or your filings. I see a Creed litigation, and I'm not sure what the most recent one was.
Yeah, there's certainly, I guess let me answer it in a couple of different buckets. I mean, there's certainly some trailing litigation around the company, some of which we believe may very well be dropped or run its course as we get into 2021. With regards to new litigation specific to the science or what have you, we'll continue to stand behind the science and the data, and we don't expect overwhelming suits to come at us in that regard. So if it's a reference to some of the older suits based on turnover of management, et cetera, we think that those will run its course, and we don't expect to hit those types of suits moving forward. Anything else that's based strictly on the science and the business model, we'll stand behind to the utmost because we have high confidence in that.
I guess I have a further question. I came in a little late. Was wondering on the nicotine side, so I didn't get maybe some of this as an overview. So is it right that you're editing, gene editing, using gene editing similar to the tobacco to maybe increase the yields or the potency of certain tobacco plants? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so when I've spoken, and thank you again for a great question. So look, the legacy of 22nd Century is clearly in modulating nicotine, both upwards that we've talked through here a little bit, and then what's on our threshold now, which is a downward modulation of it. But the plant itself, the franchise of the plant itself has been under-researched, in our opinion, for other components of the plant, much like in hemp cannabis, that can have utilization in pharmaceutical usage. Proteins of the plant, for example, have been identified for carrying of vaccines, not necessarily tied into COVID, but vaccines in general. So the proteins in the plant are very interesting. Other components of the plant, modulating them up and down, are of interest in this pharmaceutical medical OTC space as well. So the company's legacy on being able to modulate nicotine has really opened up the door to study the plant on a more holistic basis and to expand it into other end use markets. Now, we don't want to be distracted in that area. Again, we've got a very keen focus at this point with low nicotine and VLN, but we do believe the plant is very rich in other components, and we've got lines identified, concepts identified that we're moving into key gene as we speak in order to drive forward, much like we're doing on the hemp cannabis side. So you'll hear more about that as time goes on, but again, there are some rich components of the plant that we believe we can bring to bear and be very high value into high value end use markets.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Final question from me is, how much of the business do insiders own?
Rather than guessing at that number, I'll get back to you with a more specific number. I'd hate to guess it specifically, but we'll get back to you with that information. All I can tell you is, as promised, I purchased my tranche based right after the earnings call. Once the blackout period lifted, we are in a period of intense communication. Such as meetings like this. And of course, anytime we do something like this, we go back into a blackout period. So we're working around that. And my certainly desire would be to bring on additional shares personally because of my belief in the valuations moving forward. As is, the intent across the insider side. But we'll get back to you with that specific answer so that you know. And all I will say is, as things are lining up, the confidence and valuations are continue to improve, and I think we'll see additional shares being taken on the inside as time goes on.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for one or two more questions before time is up.
Well, if there's no more questions, we've been very efficient with the time, which is always a good thing. So look, I wish everyone happy holidays and stay safe in hopefully nearing the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic and getting things back to somewhat normal. And again, I always appreciate the time and the interest in 22nd Century, and look forward to communicating more with you folks in the not too distant future. With that, I'll sign off.
Thanks, James. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Thank you.